is going on, everybody? Jumbo Thick here, and we are back with our third Q&A session. So we are fast approaching almost 1,800 subscribers right now, so the channel is definitely growing, and I thought it was about time for another Q&A video. I would like to make these a little more regular, maybe once a month, once every 2 months, something like that, depending on interest. So hopefully, if you like the way that this is going, it's going to be a little more lax, not as cut and clean as most of my lore videos, which I'm sure some people are laughing right now because of my various little quirks that I have. But today's video is all about questions from you guys that I am going to answer from my comment section, mostly from the Q&A, I don't know what you would want to call that, the preface video? I don't know. I asked you guys to ask me questions, and I would do my best to answer them to the fullest of my abilities regarding anything. So let's get into our first question of the day. So I will more than likely butcher most of your guys' screen names, if they are even pronounceable. And our first question comes from John AMSN? John Emerson? I don't know. So, you know who you are. I'll just call you Jay. Just call you Jay for now. And this question is, how were you first introduced to Warhammer? Also, do you enjoy 40k? And if you know about both, which do you like more and why? Okay, so that's a pretty straightforward one. For those of you that don't know, I was never a tabletop player. As a matter of fact, the first time I was introduced to Warhammer was actually from a friend of mine. I am actually a long-time gaming fanatic, I guess you'd call it. And he introduced me to Total War Warhammer. Now, this was long before the game came out, and it interested me so much that I started digging into the lore and a lot of what kind of things to expect and what were the possibilities, and it just got me really, really excited. And actually, the first bits of, I guess, concrete lore I really delved into was actually watching Arch Warhammer's lore videos, and he put those out several years ago at this point, and the first couple, and then I decided after listening to them that, man, I started ordering all of the Warhammer fantasy novels, and I was really digging into those. I was reading army books. I was just like a crazed person, fixated on Warhammer. Don't know if that was a healthy thing or not, but anyways, so that's how I got into it. And I decided, hey, after seeing what he was doing, and I got a hold of some equipment, and this is really what inspired me to even start up my YouTube channel, was, hey, I could easily do gaming because I already do it anyway, and I need an excuse to keep it around. And then also, the lore videos that I was watching from other various YouTubers was all the same information I knew myself, and in fact I felt like I had a little bit extra that I could give, or my own take I could give on top of that. So I just felt like it was a good fit, and that people would like to hear my point of view and my ideals, and apparently some of you guys do. So you've been sticking around this long. Now, as far as 40k, I don't know as much. I've got a general sense of 40k because I did a little bit of digging into that as well, but 40k is massive. I do have a preference for probably the Tyranids. I don't know, it's shifted over times. It might be the Necrons, but then at the same time I like the Dark Eldar. I like the bad guys. That's how I am in Warhammer as well. From Warhammer Fantasy, I like all the bad races. So, but if I had to choose one, I would definitely choose Warhammer Fantasy. I'm a big fan. So don't expect any Warhammer 40k lore videos anytime soon, because I don't feel like I am adept enough in the lore study to give you anything interesting that you can't get from any other channels. Now, if you are very interested in 40k, I would highly recommend Arch Warhammer's 40k videos. he can be a little off-putting to some people. I enjoy his sense of humor, and it is what it is. But he is very knowledgeable on 40K. You can tell he's been playing it for God knows how long, decades more than likely, and he's just a pretty good source of information when it comes to that. And in fact, there are tons of other YouTubers that do the same thing. I mean, Italian Spartacus is one that I've noticed that recently has been doing a lot of 40K, kind of dipping his toe into 40K. So he's also pretty good, and you can tell he's a hardcore tabletop player. So if you're really into the tabletop, you should check him out, and he's pretty good about stuff like that. But this isn't about other YouTubers right now, so let's dial this back and let's move on to the next question. This one is from Rudolph Laubscher, Laubscher. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry. I apologize. We'll call you Rudolph though. Rudolph asks, will you make a Skaven End Times video, how it comes to the end of everything, and what happens after that? Okay, and there's actually a couple more questions here. So, as far as End Times, I have been systematically avoiding the End Times. It's kind of impossible to completely avoid it because a lot of it leaks into the later edition. You could tell that when they released 8th edition, Games Workshop that is, that they were kind of prepping for End Times, like they had already had it in their mind that they were going to be shifting to Age of Sigmar, and so they kind of were like, let's cut all of our ties to all of the fantasy novels that have been coming out up until this point, and let's end this thing. And you could tell that that was kind of a setup for it, so they changed a lot of the lore, and so that's why a lot of the older lore doesn't make a lot of sense with the newer lore that they kind of introduced. And some of the new lore is good, but I do have a preference for some of the older lore. I just thought it was a little more true, a little more unique and believable. But anyways, so as far as End Times, like I said, I have been avoiding it. I've been pretty bad about that. Now, eventually, one day, I'm not going to tell you when or how long, one day I will, in fact, do an End Times lore. And of course, it will be focused on, more than likely, Gracie or Thankful, because he's a pivotal character in the End Times, and he's basically the representative for the Skaven. So that will happen. Now, he also has another question. He asks, where do I live? Now, I have kind of addressed this in some of my older Q&A sessions, but for those of you that are new, I actually live in the U.S. I know, shocker from the accent. And surprisingly, I live in the South. I live in Arkansas. If you know about the United States, it's a very small kind of little blip on the back of the radar. Not a whole lot going on back there, but that's where I live. I can't give you any more specifics than that, mostly because I don't want somebody to hunt me down and chop my head off, but also because of the nature of my actual job. I am not allowed to disclose information on social media. So if anybody found out that I was connected to my YouTube channel, I could get in big trouble. So unfortunately, I will probably never reveal my true identity, like a superhero or something. But yeah, that was pretty corny. Sorry about that. But anyways, so that's what I'm getting at. And he also asks, this is Rudolph still asking here, what other games do you play online? Okay, now, as far as online, I was really big into, let me think back here. I used to work at GameStop when I was in college. So I was really into video games. And FYI, if you ever buy a game from GameStop and you think it's new, it might not be new, guys, because they totally let the people there check out the new games, aka bring them home and play them and then bring them back and pretend it's new and sell it to you. Because technically, it is new until it is sold. So it's kind of the same deal with cars. Like, they can drive it around the lot and do all kinds of stuff to it, and it's technically still a new vehicle. So yeah, that's a different topic. Getting off topic here. So I've played a ton of games, but the ones that I am the most passionate about was online I was really big into Battlefield, especially the latest Battlefield. I play that with a lot of my friends online still. I've got a couple friends from GameStop I still play games with. Jumbo Smooth, I know you're out there, hopefully watching this. I'll kill you if you're not. And then, what else would I play? I played a lot of Dark Souls, which is why I am very excited for the remaster, because I've even played Demon Souls. I know a lot of people probably don't even recognize that name, but that was the prequel to Dark Souls. I've been around for a while. I'm revealing my age here, but I'm really into those kinds of games, kind of that hardcore kind of punch myself in the nuts because it hurts me so bad because I suck at it kind of game. So that's what I've got into. And of course I really like scary games, which you don't play online that much, but yeah. Anyway, so Souls games, definitely was into those, and of course Battlefield. And man, I really got into I get into card games. Now, the card games that I'm more kind of geared towards are the like Magic the Gathering kind of games that they put out online. I have a problem with buying physical things, so I don't actually have any Magic cards, but I love the rules and I love the game, and I feel like it's actually a more level playing field when you play like on the consoles. They had like Planeswalker duels and stuff like that, and therefore nobody can have like the ultimate deck. You're all kind of stuck with, hey, this is what you get and go. And so it kind of, I mean, it's still rock paper scissors occasionally, but there's a little more skill in my opinion. That's kind of that's at least how I feel about it. I don't want to offend any Magic players out there because I do love the game. So that's about it for the what my little side interests are there. So hopefully I answered your question, Mr. Rudolph. And now we will move on to the next. Well, he's got another question about more Skaven lore, and of course I will deliver more Skaven lore eventually, someday. All right, and I've got a couple questions here from Mr. Frog Vapor. Awesome name, by the way, pretty awesome name. And his first question is, when Malekith, the Witch King, leader of the Dark Elves, was rounding up the Cult of Pleasure heathens, was he building an army with them or killing them to get rid of his competition, or was it maybe both? Now, I've kind of covered this a little bit. I don't know, it's been a while since I've watched my Malekith video. I don't make a habit of rewatching my old videos, but from what I remember, because I do a lot of research before I do all my videos, and I read all of the Malekith trilogy. Essentially, it was the trilogy of the Sundering, is what it was. And the way it sounded in the novels, now I prefer the way it happens in the novels over the way it happened in the lore. The lore was a little more black and white. In the novels, when he first started, he wasn't in completely gone full like Darth Vader yet, I guess. So essentially in the beginning he was actually uprooting Chaos Worshippers, because that's what they were Chaos Worshippers. But slowly over time he kind of got it in his head that hey, I should be the Phoenix King. And this might have been the crown that he was wearing, the crown of sorcery, really was starting to wear on him at this point. It started to actually change kind of pieces of his personality. And it might have been that influence, and it was probably a little bit of his mother, because his mother was captured. He captured his mother, and she was imprisoned. And through their visits with her, he started kind of changing even more than he already was. And so at first, I would say, so it's kind of a two-parter here. At first, he was definitely kind of doing his due diligence and uprooting Chaos Worshippers, because obviously you don't want Chaos Worshippers around the Vortex of all places. That could be really bad if they unbound it in some way. And also just Chaos Worshippers in general don't mesh well with civilized society. So originally he was doing his due diligence, just kind of uprooting them, but then through various means, he kind of got it put in his head that, hey, I deserve to be Phoenix King. And so he started actually abusing his position as essentially the head of an inquisition to detain other political rivals and people that wouldn't support his rule. And so he was actually framing them as chaos worshippers, and for the most part he was just outright killing them. Like, they just would die. He would have them like, oh, they accidentally got murdered in this raid, I don't know what happened, or they wouldn't give up and I had to cut his throat, stuff like that. And for the most part, he just got rid of them. They didn't. They weren't like taken prisoner or anything. Some of them were, but for the most part, that's how that happened. And then he actually got it in his mind that he took all those chaos worshippers that he rounded up, and essentially used them as shock troops whenever he finally announced himself as the new Phoenix King. They were his kind of go-to army, and they were, of course, crazy and whatnot. They're chaos worshippers. But so yes, it was a little bit of both for him, and he had good intentions when he set out. That's why I like Malekith as a character, because you can kind of see him turn. He's definitely that Darth Vader-esque kind of character where he was set out to be a good dude, and then just through circumstances and what happened to him, he ended up being a very, very terrible person. And he was, in fact, just this awful, disgusting being towards the end. He's not even, I don't even know if you would consider him living. I mean, he doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, he doesn't do anything physical because he's trapped in his armor, and he's always burning, and it's awful. You know, he's kind of not even, it's like a half-life. He's supporting his own existence off of magic at this point. So he's a crazy character, and I can keep going on about him, and I have. If you haven't checked out my Malekith video, you totally should, man. Totally should. Alright, enough rambling about Malekith now. I'm done gushing. Maybe. I don't know. I might circle back to it. You never know. So, okay. Moving on to the next question from Mr. Frogpaper. If a Tomb King soldier dies, can a necromancer resurrect them? Seems like a fight between the two would just be who has more magic, who can resurrect the fastest. Okay, so I am doing a necromancer lore video coming up pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that, guys, because it's going to be about necromancy and how it relates to the vampire counts, which is very different from the way a necromancer from the Tomb Kings binds spirits to their warriors. Okay, and let me just give you an example. So the standard just skeletons of the Tomb Kings are very similar to the way that a necromancer animates just zombies from a regular necromancer spell. They're just kind of embodied with like a, not a lesser spirit, I would guess. I'm not quite sure how to put this, because from the necromancers, from a regular necromancy standpoint, they're kind of just like pieces of the necromancer's will. They're not necessarily inhabited by a soul, whereas the Tomb Kings units are inhabited by actual Nehekarnans. So they're actually bringing souls back from essentially the land of the dead, like the afterlife, and from the realm of souls, and binding them into their old bodies, which is why the Tomb Guard, and like, for instance, they have archers and things like that, because they are more capable, because they were actually warriors and they remember a lot of their old past, and they're just better in general. Now, the same thing can be kind of told with the grave guard of the vampire counts. The grave guard and like the White Kings, things like that. Now, they're kind of different from regular necromancy, because especially the White Kings. The White Kings are actually the souls of whoever that was that died, bound back into their mortal form, which in this case is just a skeleton. And so they are extremely powerful, for the same way that the Tomb Guard are powerful. And the same thing goes for the Grave Guard. They are actually the souls of these undead, or these long dead warriors bound back into these. And so they're more elite, I guess you would say, is the way that works. So the way this would work is, let's say the vampire counts and the Tomb Kings are fighting. They're dying all over each other. And this kind of happened in the end times with Nagash coming against the Tomb Kings. And the way this works is, it was kind of a never-ending fight because both sides could just keep resurrecting their dead. Now, the Tomb Kings, the way that they resurrect their dead is they regather the corpse and kind of put it back together with their magic and then resummon the soul back into it. The way the necromancy works for the vampire counts and for just those kind of units in general is they can just give life to whatever they want. They can just reanimate it through magical means. They don't necessarily need a soul. A soul helps if you want it to do something in particular, but they don't actually need a soul. They can just use dark magic and just resurrect it. So essentially, if a Tomb King's corpse fell, it laid out. So it's devoid of the previous soul from the Tomb King pantheon or whatever has gone back to the realm of souls. It could be resurrected by an enemy necromancer easily, but it wouldn't be capable of the same feats. That's the difference here. It wouldn't be as good of a warrior as it would be if it was inhabited by the soul, which is what's put back into it when a Tomb King Lich Priest re-resurrects a unit. So that got a little complicated, and I promise I'm going to be kind of doing this all in a lore video. So I will definitely expand upon this question, but hopefully that kind of gave you a short answer. And the next question, once again, is from Mr. Frog Vapor. Man, you got 3 questions for me. That's pretty awesome. It says, if Teclis took the sword of Cain instead of Tyrion, would he be cured of all his physical illnesses? Seems like he'd be almost unstoppable with it. So, for those of you that don't know, in the end times, Tyrion, who the savior of the elven people, the strongest, the best, ends up taking up the sword of Cain. So that's kind of a spoiler alert for anybody that was trying to hold out and not learn about that. And he becomes an incarnation of Cain. Not exactly the best thing to be. So, but it turns him into an incarnation of Cain. It turns him into almost an Aryan reborn, because the same thing happened to an Aryan. And it does flood him with power. Now, Teclis, being his twin, has just as much of the blood of an Aryan flowing through him, but he is maimed. He's unusual for elves. He's weak, and he needs magic to keep himself alive. He's a very powerful sorcerer, which is how he's been getting along all this time. So what the question is asking is basically a what-if question. What if he took a hold of his sword? Well, first off, Tyrion is more inclined towards picking up something like that. Like, if you ever read the Tyrion and Teclis novels, which I do highly recommend, they're very good, very well written, in fact, you'll see that Tyrion really doesn't want to be the hero that he's made out to be. He's kind of forced into it. He doesn't want to, he wants to go out and do his own thing. So it kind of makes sense that he would gravitate towards something like the Sword of Cain, because it's very taboo. It's something that, hey, you shouldn't be touching this, you're not allowed to do this, so on and so forth. So it makes kind of a sense. He's a little bit of a rebel in that way, in that he'll try to shaft the upper management whenever he can, just to kind of just get a little dig at him. But at the same time, he does obey orders, so I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyways, Teclis, if he got a hold of the sword, I have a feeling it would do something to him similar in the way that there's actually I think it's called the Warp Sword of Cain. I think that's right. Don't quote me directly. But there is another Warhammer hero that gets a hold of another divine sword of Cain. And of course, he's Dark Elf, Malice Darkblade. And what it does in him is it changes his physiology almost, makes him bloodthirsty, and it makes him forget all of his tactics and everything like that. So if Teclis took a hold of the Sword of Cain, since it is a sword and it doesn't have you can't shoot fireballs or anything like that, I think that it would probably cure him of his illness, but it would put him in a berserk rage, because that is what Cain does. Cain is the god of murder and just bloodshed. And so I think that he would just forget all of his magical prowess. It would just be gone, and he would just turn into a mindless kind of... Well, I mean, I guess he has such strong willpower, he would hold on to some of it, but he would probably gravitate more towards just violence in general, and especially the sword wants to actually feel blood against it. I know that's rather disturbing, but the sword is almost a living embodiment of Cain. So, of course, it wants blood and dismemberment, and it wants to actually do the killing itself. It doesn't want to have some flashy magic dash its hopes from it. So I think that it would change him in such a way that it would kind of force him into more of a melee combatant. So I don't know. But and then in the same essence, if he became a straight up melee combatant, I feel like there would be other Warhammer heroes out there that would be able to take him on, even with the Sword of Cain that he has. For instance, Tyrion, the reason why Tyrion is so potent with it is because even without the Sword of Cain, Tyrion is one of the most physically adept fighters in the Warhammer world. So that's one of the reasons why him on top of the Sword of Cain makes him just this unstoppable killing force, because he was already potent without it. So yes, it would give Teclis powers that he normally wouldn't have, and probably cure all his elements, but at the same time, I don't think he would be as overpowered as you're thinking. And in my personal opinion, now this is definitely a what-if question, so you could kind of take it however you want, but that's just the way I feel about it. All right, and our next question comes from Zagur's Headwaka. Is that Zagur's Headwaka? Headwaka. That is awesome. Zagur's Headwaka. I think I might have read a question from you before, but Mr. Headwaka. So, are there different animal varieties of beastmen in the Warhammer world? I've heard that there are rhino beastmen in the Southlands. Okay, so the beastmen in general are all over the Warhammer world. They're in every single continent. They're everywhere. And there are different kinds of beastmen in that. You don't actually see them, because usually the beastmen that you get from the kind of armies and the traditional Warhammer novels are just the typical goat-headed kind of beastmen, or the minotaurs, like the bovine kind of minotaurs. But there are, in fact, all different kinds of beastmen. There are beastmen with, like, bird heads, for instance. There are beastmen that, like you said, there are kind of rhino, elephant kind of beastmen in the Southlands. They're more of an exotic kind of beastmen. And then there are, in fact, beastmen that have a tiger's head, kind of or lions and tigers, things like that. And they are actually in the land of Cathay, kind of the Far East, kind of an Eastern themed kind of beastmen. So really the beastmen are themed depending on what region of the world they're in. The way I kind of see it as is the beastmen are combinations of humans and animals. And it happened whenever the flood of chaos washed over the world. Well, the way I think of this personally is the humans mixed with whatever animals were nearby. They kind of became what was next to them, essentially. And so that's why the beastmen can really be anything. They can be anything. Now, you will only see a certain kind of beastmen in a certain place, because though they do all make pilgrimages almost to the Chaos Waste occasionally, for the most part, they kind of stick to their local herd, or wherever they're locally out of, wherever they call their home. Now, beastmen are wandering bands, so there is that. They do wander all over the place, but for the most part, you're only going to see the standard goat-headed beastmen, and that's mostly because those are the kinds you're going to see in the Old World. Those are the kinds you're going to see in the Southlands. Those are the kinds you see for the most part in the Chaos Wastes, and they're the ones that make the most appearances in the fantasy novels. But there are different kinds, and they are described in the army books, so there is that. And, fun fact, there are beast women. We get a glimpse of one in one of the Gotrek, and I think it's the very first Gotrek and Felix novel. There's actually a beast woman that kind of makes a brief appearance. And the next question, kind of piggybacking off the last one, is from Chris Gibson. Any plans for a Beastmen lore series? Hell yes. I really like the Beastmen. I like them quite a bit. I like all the evil factions. That's just the way I am. I gravitate towards them. I know, I probably says something about my personality. But But yes, I'm definitely going to be doing a Beastmen lore series. I'm not sure when. Right now we're hitting up vampires. If you haven't checked it out, you should definitely check it out. I'm beginning my vampire lore series. And who knows, maybe the Beastmen will be next. It just depends on, first off, it depends on what's announced for Total War. I kind of want to keep up to date with what's coming out with the new factions. I don't know when we're going to get any information on that, but if we don't, then of course I'm going to cover the factions that have already existed up to this point, and I want to try to hit them first before I go into too much in the kind of side factions that I don't think may or may not make an appearance in Total War. That's the kind of way my brain's working right now, the way I'm thinking about it. But that could always change. But to answer your question, yes, I will be hitting up Beastmen eventually. I don't know when. But I do plan on hitting up every single major faction, and even most of the minor factions of Warhammer at some point before I don't know. I could probably cover Warhammer lore for a long time, honestly. There's a lot to chew through, so there's no stopping anytime soon. But yes, to answer your question, hell yeah, Beastmen lore series coming in sometime in the near future. And the next question I have is from, this is going to be bad, Hyunzong. I'm assuming you're Asian, and I can't pronounce it. I apologize. I'm going to call you Jay. You're Jay. You're also Jay now. Says, do you have any plans for videos about dwarves or Bretonnia? Because they're my favorite factions from Warhammer Total War. Awesome. And he is from Korea. So yes, he's from Korea. So thanks for making fun videos from Korea. That's awesome, man. I had no idea I had any kind of watchers in Korea, so that's pretty cool. But as it's kind of piggybacks off the last one, yes, I'm probably leaning a little more towards dwarves before Bretonnia, just because I haven't yet read a lot of the novels involving Bretonnia, so I kind of like to do my research before I put a lore video out there. But yes, I'm definitely going to be doing both the dwarves and Bretonnia at some point in the near future, similar to the Beastmen. So just be on the lookout for those guys. It'll happen someday. I'm not completely full of wind here. Alright, and now moving on to the next question. The next one is from Petrucci Ibiza. Now, you are trying to kill me today. You know that? You know with this question you're trying to murder me? So this is definitely, it even says, so I warn you, this is a long question. Yes, it is. In some case, if we do get in Nippon and Cathay Araby, what legendary lords do you think we would get for these factions? Holy shit. That's a loaded question, you know that? That is a loaded question. So, alright, let's start from the top, and then, and there's a second question too. We'll get to that after this. So, as far as Ind, Nippon, and Cathay, Ind and Nippon, there is almost zero information about. They're mentioned in lore, but that is the full extent of it. I haven't even run across anybody in the novel series that has any relations with them. Now, for that reason, it's just all speculation because there's nothing concrete to go off of. There was a fan-made army books that were made about these various nations because they were never actually officially given a army book, and so there are fan-made stuff that you could look up, but I'm not as familiar with it as I am some of the actual army books, so I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Now, Ind and Nippon, so it's basically India and Japan. I don't think that we're gonna, honestly, it would be awesome if they did come, and there is descriptions of what their kind of culture is like, and it's based off of what you think it is. The Nippon is completely based off of feudal Japan. It says it has knights resplendent in lacquered wooden armor, enforcing a rigid feudal system. It doesn't have feudal system, but I'm assuming that's what it is. And then for Ind, it basically says that they're kind of, they don't wear hardly any clothes, and they have like blowpipes and curved swords and stuff like that. So it's very stereotypical of what these nations were like in the kind of earlier times in their history. So that's kind of what they're based off of. Now, Cathay that's a different story. I can actually give you some stuff on Cathay. Now, Legendary Lords, I don't know. That would be a hard one. The Dragon Emperor is mentioned several times. There is a Dragon Emperor, and he is kind of like the Emperor for the Empire. He's just the head of it. He's the tippity top of them, and I'm assuming it's going to be very similar to the way the line of succession was passed down in China, because that's what Cathay is. Cathay is based off of historical China. And so it's going to be a lot of nobility kind of back and forth, and so that's what that's very much like. Now, we do get actually a little glimpse into their social structure in one of the Nagash novels. I believe it is the second one. It is Nagash Unbroken, I believe. And basically we get to see them interact with Lamia, because they both Cathay is ancient. It is as old as Nehekhara. It might even be the oldest human civilization. It's not completely said which came first, but they're definitely that old of a civilization, and they still exist to this day. So, as far as Cathay, Legendary Lords, if we got Cathay, I think Cathay would be the most likely out of the three, if we're being honest. But I don't think it's going to happen. I keep saying that. But the Dragon Emperor would be one. Now, there is also, if you go into the lore, specifically into those novel series, there is actually a branch of the royal family that was turned into vampires by Neferata. She turned one of the, I believe he was a prince, and he was essentially the ambassador to Lamia from Cathay. So this was thousands of years ago, but he could still be around. So he could also be a legendary lord. That would be super interesting if you actually had a immortal that he's been living for thousands of years, leading these Cathayan troops, these kind of Chinese-inspired fantasy troops. That would be, it sounds pretty awesome. It sounds very fanciful, and I doubt it will happen, but it is a good thought experiment nonetheless. Now, Araby. Araby is a different beast. Araby, they didn't have their own army book, but they're mentioned in the lore so often, and they are prevalent because, of their location. They are very old, almost as old as Nehekhara, I would say, somewhere close. I think back then they were probably just barbarians, if we're being honest, but we actually see them in the Warhammer 2 maps. So Bel Aliad, Kofur, Lashik, Martek, those are places that are inhabited by the Arabians originally. Of course, they still are inhabited for the most part, but Arkan he tore through them pretty bad. Arkan the Black pretty much tore through and destroyed much of Araby. And then there was the Black Sultan. I want to say his name was Jafar, not to be confused with the Disney villain, but there was the Sultan that inspired the Errantry Wars, which also was manipulated by the Skaven. Little known fact there. So Araby has a lot going for it. As far as legendary lords, it would be pretty awesome if they brought back the Sultan Jafar, just because, well, it is kind of, I don't know if that's copyright infringement or not, but because he's like I want to say he's kind of a caster lord. He's the standard kind of caster, I shoot magic out of my fingers and burn you alive kind of stuff. It is very Cathayan, or not Cathayan, damn it. Arabian magic is very wind-oriented and kind of desert-like, very similar to the lore of Nehekhara, honestly. But they also have bound spirits and things like that from the lore. Like they have genies and magic carpets, and it's Arabian Nights. I mean, it's pretty obvious what they based it off of. So essentially, Sultan Jafar would be my pick. He's pretty cool. And then the second one would have to be probably Al-Mukhtar. He is the leader of the Al-Mukhtar's Desert Dogs from the Dogs of War, but it is the only Arabian unit that I know of that is actually in Warhammer and has like models in the tabletop game. So the only thing about Al-Mukhtar leading part of the Arabian faction is Al-Mukhtar is actually, he's a white dude. He's not even Arabian. So don't know how I feel about that one, but you know, there's all that. There's a lot of stuff going on with that. There's a couple other people that are mentioned. I don't know as much about them. Like, I want to say Golden Magus? Was that his name? Golden Magus? I think that's his name. He was another sorcerer, and I want to say he had like a ship, and I don't know, there was genies involved. I don't remember the entire story. I would have to really do some research for that. So when I finally get to my Araby videos, because I do want to do Araby, because in my opinion they're a lesser known of the standard factions. I feel like they should have actually gotten an all-in army book, but one day I'll get to Araby and we will delve into this a little more deeply. Alright, now on to the second part of your rather long question. In case we do get 4 separate Demons of Chaos factions, can you name at least 2 legendary lords for each faction? Okay, I'm going to do my best here for this one. So, for those of you that don't know, the 4 main Chaos deities would essentially be their own faction. So you have Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. Now, starting with Khorne, if we did get individual factions for Chaos, Khorne, I think, would probably be the easiest one to pull out some legendary lords. The most obvious one to me is Valkia the Bloody. Now, she could also, she might be a lord for Norsca. I don't know. See, that's the hard part about the Norskins, because somebody needs to lead their factions. They have 2 people right now, but they do need some more lords. And most of the chaotic heroes, notable heroes, were originally Norskins. So I don't know where the line is drawn, if we're being honest, because that's a hard one to take. Because honestly, I probably would have thought Wulfric the Wanderer would have been a Chaos Warrior, leading Chaos Warriors. But in the lore, he does lead Norskin, so maybe that's why they picked him. But I'm getting off topic here. So, Valkia the Bloody would probably be my first pick. She is the Valkyrie for Khorne himself. And the other one that makes a lot of appearances, in the lore at least, and very infamous on the tabletop, would be Skarbrand. And Skarbrand is a greater demon. He's a bloodthirster. And he's kind of lobotomized by Khorne himself. He's not what he used to be. He was tricked by Tzeentch into attacking Khorne, and he was forever changed afterwards, after what Khorne did to him. But those 2 would probably be my picks. They're the most popular, in my opinion. And that would pretty much do it for Khorne. Now, moving on to Tzeentch. Tzeentch, I think, is a pretty easy one as well. The first one, in my opinion, would probably be Kairos Fate Weaver, who is a greater Lord of Change, who essentially was thrown into the well of eternity by Tzeentch himself, because he was too afraid to go in it to himself. And he's loyal to Tzeentch. Just it's kind of hard to explain the way demon kind works. I will be eventually doing demon videos, so do look forward to those. But Kairos Fate Weaver would be one of my picks. He's a very interesting character. He has 2 heads. Each can cast different spells, and he can see the past and the future, but he can't see the present. It's kind of one of those things. It's interesting, needless to say. He's a cool character. And then the second one's a little bit harder, but if I had to pick, I might say the Changeling, just because he's like a trickster. He'll mimic other. He's actually one of the reasons the End Times was pulled off, for being completely honest. And so yeah, I would go with the Changeling and Kairos Fate Weaver. The Changeling because he embodies Tzeentch, like fooling with trickery and lots of betrayal and things like that. That would be pretty cool. Alright, and then as far as Nurgle is concerned, let's see here. I guess the only 2, legendary lords, material that I can think of would be, I want to say his name is Epidemius? I don't know how to say it. He's the Maggot King. And he is pretty awesome. He's a chosen of Nurgle. And, of course, all of the Nurgle heroes or people that are dedicated to Nurgle are super disgusting. And he's kind of gross. They're all pretty gross, but he would be one to look out for. And then I think the other one would probably be Kugoth Plaguefather. He has a very prominent role in the end times as well. A lot of these demons have a lot of prominent roles in the end times, which is how I know about them, even though I haven't done my due diligence yet. But Kugoth Plaguefather and probably Epidemus would probably be the two that I remember from the army books the most. Now, Slaanesh is going to be a hard one to come up with, honestly. I would have actually picked Sigvald, to be completely honest, but I can't because he's part of the Chaos roster. For some reason, that's the guy. He would have been the one I would have picked because Slaanesh doesn't have lords. He doesn't have lord level characters. The only one that I know about is the Mask of Slaanesh, and she is a demonette that was favored by Slaanesh. So there's her, but I can't think of anybody else really. Let me try to rack my brain here as far as anybody else. Oh, yeah, what the hell am I thinking of? Of course, Nikari. Nikari would actually make even more sense than her. But I can't think of any other Slaaneshi characters, so maybe that's maybe those two. Nikari for sure. Nikari would be a shoe-in. She is, well, I should say it. When you talk about Slaanesh, it should be it, unless you're talking about demonettes. But Nikari is a greater demon that basically has it out for Tyrion and Teclis. It wants to murder everybody with the blood of an Aryan. So it also wants to murder Malekith. But yeah, there's a whole story that goes with that one. But yeah, those would be my picks for the Legendary Lords if we ever did get a Chaos Demon roster split, which I'm not sure. I don't know if CI will do it or not. It would be awesome if they did, but I'm not sure. All right, we got two more questions to get through, guys. So the next question comes from 48 Lows, and it says, how do you feel about other YouTubers' interpretation of the Warhammer lore? Okay, so I do watch other YouTubers' lore videos, and they do give me ideas. The ones I watch the most are, I really was into Loremaster Sotek. It's kind of saddens me that he's kind of fallen off of all of the lore videos. He doesn't do them as often anymore because I really enjoyed everything he did. He puts a lot of production value behind it, stuff that I don't feel like I could pull off myself, and he's very knowledgeable in it. So if you haven't checked out Loremaster Sotek, he has a lot of good stuff, and he still does come out with stuff. It isn't very often anymore, but he has a very good interpretation of it because he has been vested in the Warhammer universe for a long time, and so for that reason I respect all of his knowledge. Now, there's also Arch Warhammer, of course. Some people don't like Arch just because of his style, I guess. It's kind of snippy, a little sarcastic. I still enjoy all of his videos, and there's a lot of other YouTubers like him. So I feel like people are usually pretty comfortable with it, and he's also a good source of information, and I value his opinions because he is right on the money for the most part with all of his lore. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and for that reason I gotta respect that as well. Now, there's also Inept General. If you haven't checked out Inept General, those are the three big ones that I follow, the guys that have a lot more of a following than myself, of course. And the Inept General he is got a lot of information, and that dude is an awesome storyteller. So you guys should also check him out, and he has way more lore videos out than I do. He's been doing a lot longer than me, but he's really good at it as well. And as far as interpretation, most of the other guys I've noticed, most of the other YouTubers don't delve into the novels as much as I like to. I prefer the novels. I've made that well known, I think, that I prefer the novels over the army books, and for that reason I feel like I have kind of a different take on it myself. But that's not always that's not the end all be all. That doesn't mean that's the only way that you can look at the lore, because it's an opinion, really. There's facts laid out, but for the most part there's a lot of dots that have to be connected to put out any kind of coherent lore videos because of just the nature of what we're talking about. Warhammer's been around for 30 plus years. So that's a lot of history and a lot of lore to piece together to really get anything going. So for that reason, that's kind of how I feel about the other guys doing YouTube. I feel like we all have our own niche. We all kind of we're doing something similar, but it is unique in its own way. So I would encourage you guys to check out those other YouTubers, though, if you haven't already, because they do have a lot of good content. And Frog Vapor snuck in one more question that he did. He asked, what's the relationship between vampires and necromancers? Are necromancers subservient to vampires? Do most vampires know necromancy? Does someone like Vlad actually raise his army of undead, or does he get a necromancer to do it for him? Okay, so I am kind of starting to go into this in the my lore videos that I started making about vampire counts, but as far as the relationship between vampires and necromancers, they are very different. Now, a lot of vampires are also necromancers, but there's a distinction. It's not all of them. Only some of them are necromancers. Now, those of the von Karstein bloodline tend to be capable of necromancy, as well as those from the Necroc Brotherhood. They also are pretty good necromancers themselves. So they're able to actually do a lot of the raising of their undead forces on their own. Now, the other bloodlines, and even some von Karsteins, are okay with magic, but not always adept at it. The one that comes to mind the most is Conrad von Karstein, who was completely inept when it came to necromancy. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't summon a wind if his life depended on it, which it did at one point, and that's the reason why he's not around. But basically, the way this usually works between vampires and necromancers, because they do go hand in hand, is that a lot of necromancers will almost sell their services to vampires, because the vampires have attained tons and tons of knowledge over the centuries that they've been alive, and so they will employ necromancers, kind of tempting them with knowledge, saying, hey, I'll let you hang out my library, I just ask for you to do this, this, and this, or hey, I have a book of Nagash, would you like to read it? And kind of lures them towards them, and gets them to kind of work for them and do their bidding. Now, they can also be enslaved to vampires if their will is weak, but that's rare, and that would have to be a very powerful vampire, honestly. But in the case of Vlad actually raised most of his army on his own. Now, that's not usually the case with most vampires. Most vampires aren't capable of raising and holding an entire army on their own. Manfred is one that comes to mind. Vlad, because Vlad got a hold of one of the books of Nagash and was reading from it. That's how he was able to do it. And then, of course, there's Soren, and a lot of the Necrocs are able to do it. But for the most part, nobody's able to. The vampires alone aren't able to raise that many undead at once. And so they have to employ necromancers through the means that I kind of mentioned. They can be subservient, but for the most part, they're almost like free agents. They're almost like mercenaries. You kind of hire them out, they do your bidding. And necromancers are kind of drawn towards sources of dark magic, which is what vampires kind of exude, because they are dark magic, and so they're kind of drawn together. It's just one of those things, they always end up together, and that's kind of how the Vampire Counts army kind of comes together in that case. Well, guys, that was finally it. That was the last question. So I rambled on for quite some time. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I definitely enjoy making these videos for you guys, and I enjoy all of the people watching, man. I just enjoy that the channel's grown as much as it had. I didn't have high hopes for this. I didn't think that we were going to get as big as we are now, and I'm excited now. I'm excited to see what the future holds for all of us. In the Cult of Thick, or the Thick Boys, as most of you like to call yourselves, it's rather disturbing, but I at least like Cult of Thick. So, anyways, guys, thank you very much for tuning in and listening in to this, if you have made it this far. And I appreciate all of you guys' viewership and all your viewers, subscribes, and just all the support. And I'd like to say thank you for all of it. And I look forward to seeing more, to keep interacting with you guys. We have a very good thriving, positive community, in my opinion, a very positive community compared to a lot of other YouTubers. And for that, I am very grateful. As always, guys, I have been Jumbo Thick. Thank you oh so much for making this far in the video, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Have a good day.